Buongiorno a tutti e cominciamo con un minimo ritardo per essere l'Italia di 10 minuti, che sono quei 10-15 minuti accademici. Per chi non mi conosca, io mi chiamo Alexandra Ciavarria e ho il triste compito e dispiacere di darvi il benvenuto e presentare questa prima sessione del convegno, seminario Human Environment Interactions during Glaciale, Exploring Archaeological Perspectives. Perché triste? Perché non sono io che da programma avrei dovuto presentare il convegno, ma come accordo tra PI, la professoressa Valentina Giuffra dava il benvenuto, io mi occupavo delle conclusioni. Come molti di voi sapete o ve lo racconto io, purtroppo la professoressa Giuffra ha avuto un triste dolo lutto in famiglia e quindi oggi proprio non ci poteva essere. Io approfitto e uso l'occasione, se ci sta sentendo, se ci sentirà, perché questo convegno seminario verrà anche registrato e messo a disposizione, credo su YouTube, di salutarla, abbracciarla, dire che tutti noi le stiamo vicini oggi e quando serva in futuro. Ecco, questo seminario organizzato inizialmente come conclusione, ma adesso pensiamo forse come punto intermedio di questo progetto PRIN 2022, ha l'obiettivo di presentare le ricerche e discutere le ricerche preliminari che abbiamo svolto all'interno di questo progetto, come vedete dal titolo, sull'impatto del cambiamento climatico in generale, ma in particolare su quello tardoantico, sulle popolazioni, sull'ambiente, sull'alimentazione di questo periodo storico e confrontarlo con le analisi, gli studi fatti da altri studiosi, da altri paesi europei, a chi I welcome everybody who is coming or who came to this seminar. Thank you very much. We will talk later all in English and I will make the conclusions in English. I just wanted to start in the language of the country which hosts us, which is not mine, by the way. Il progetto Biolalia, sapete che ha come università capofila l'Università di Pisa, che ci ospita oggi, e l'Università di Padova, nella quale io insegno, ma voglio sottolineare come ci sono state anche due università che da progetto, e questo non è che si fa sempre, da progetto abbiamo pensato che collaborassero nelle nostre indagini, sono qui, hanno collaborato e continueranno a collaborare l'Università di Roma La Sapienza e l'Università di Vienna, a cui diciamo do anche il nostro benvenuto. Io mi auguro, e con questo concludo per non togliere più tempo al convegno, che ci siano degli interventi interessanti. Sappiamo tutti che sono interventi preliminari, alcuni ovviamente keynotes sono anche di contesto per aiutarci a comprendere dove siamo e che cosa stiamo facendo, ma i risultati li aspettiamo preliminari, aspettiamo che ci sia discussione, aspettiamo poter chiedere e rispondere su quei dubbi che abbiamo ancora su questa tematica. Quindi io anche propongo chi sia ancora sul dubbio o non abbia chiaro quanti tempi ha. Sappiamo che i keynote lecture sono di 30 minuti e quelli lasciamo così. Gli altri gruppi, the other ones, you have 20 minutes. If somebody wants to stay shorter to leave more space to the discussion, we are all welcome to do this. The last paper at 3:40, which was on millet plants, unfortunately won't be held today because both researchers are ill, probably with COVID, I think, so better they didn't come, and that's why we can have a longer discussion at the end. Please don't leave us without discussing. And, well, I think that's all.
Abbiamo una pausa breve o qualcosa?
Okay, later we will have also a break, coffee break. That are the best moments of any seminar because it gives us the opportunity to talk with each other. Don't be shy, ask, try to make your network because this seminar is for this. Okay, thank you very much and see you later.
Okay, good morning everyone and welcome. In this case, I will speak in English only. Welcome to this colloquium day, Human Environmental Interactions during LALIA, exploring bioarchaeological perspectives. I'm Giulia Ricomi and I am from the University of Pisa and I am also unit team member for this PRIN project. And that's my pleasure to chair this first session and as well as to introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Emanuela Cristiani. And Emanuela Cristiani, please come to the stage, please, is Associate Professor of Prehistoric Archaeology at Sapienza University of Rome, and she leads the Dante Library, Diet and Ancient Technology, where she pioneers interdisciplinary research into the life ways of Paleolithic and Mesolithic societies in Southern Europe. Professor Cristiani held different and prestigious fellowships. Among the others, we have, for example, the Wenner Foundation Postdoctoral Fellowship, as well as a Marie Curie Individual Research Fellowship, and she was also awarded with an ERC Starring Grant with the project Hidden Foods, plant fruits in Paleolithic and Mesolithic societies of Southern Eastern Europe and Italy, in which she explored the dietary practices and technologies of ancient hunter-gatherer through the integration of anthropological and the cultural evidence. More recently, Professor Cristiani is the PI of another PRIN project, Roman Calculus, aims to develop standards for detecting residues of cannabis, for example, drugs and other substances that might have been used in the past through the analysis of the dental calculus. Professor Cristiani, I have to say, has significantly advanced our understanding of the behavior and life conditions and different aspects of prehistoric, in particular, societies, and her contributions continue to shape the field of the archaeology in a way of the interdisciplinary approach. And today we will hear a talk by Professor Cristiani and colleagues entitled Dental Calculus and Human Environmental Interactions, Tracing Diet and Resilience During LALIA.
So, good morning and thanks for this nice presentation. I didn't know I did all these things, so thank you. So good morning everyone, and I have to say I'm truly honored to be here, and I'd like to sincerely thank the organizer for this invitation. And I have to say, as an archaeologist and actually a prehistorian by training, I feel like a bit of an outsider here, but especially because since 2015 I've been working with like paleo diet and characterization of, as I said, like plant foods in prehistory. Been working a lot with stone tool technology, so the relationship between environment, like diet and evolution of technology. But in a way, being here in this conference is also kind of very important for me because I can explore with you, of course, the latest advance of dental calculus in historical context. And in a way, I'm also particularly happy to have a chance to present some results of a collaborative work that we have been, that kind of stems from collaboration with the organizers of the conference themselves, and so a collaboration that developed within the framework of Biolalia and all the sites that the project works on. So the focus will be on dental calculus and the potential to recognize diet, health, and the relationship of environment and human works, so occupational practices during the late antique Little Ice Age. So in this slide, I just wanted to quickly give you an overview of what we will be talking today. And the focus, we'll be talking about dental calculus, of course, so what kind of information it can reveal. And you will agree very soon that what makes this kind of field of research particularly exciting is its interdisciplinary nature. So
we will see how like archaeology, biology, chemistry, and botany and so on just came together to extract meaning from a very tiny little bit of mineralized plaque. And in the context of Biolala project, we're using dental calculus to explore how people adapted to their health and status strategies during a period of very climatic instability and social transformation. So it actually is a good opportunity also to test this method in more, antique periods. So to begin the session, we'll take a close look to the dental calculus. We can also call it like tartar. And I can say that as I'm coming from the odontology department in Rome Sapienza, so we can use that term as well. And over the last decade, we can see that this mineralized plaque has emerged as one of the most powerful tools for reconstructing diet and also for understanding the lifestyle of the ancient population. So it has become a powerful tool because in a way it can uncover what we call the ancient biography. So not only what we can effectively find like as a DNA or as a particle, but just to kind of connect it with the life and with the individual, with the culture. So kind of bonding together archaeology and also something else like coming from the different perspective of study. So here you see like the sort of the first toothbrush, the earliest device that we used to remove. So the moment we started to remove this from our teeth became around 3,500 years ago. Well, long before the introduction and in absence actually of regular brushing, this dental plaque accumulates on the surface of the teeth and gradually mineralize into this calculus, and it comes like both like above and below the dental gum. And in this process that is driven by the interaction of the plaque with the inorganic salts, like that is why it is mineralized, that are present in the saliva. So this the crystallinity layers like increased, and in this way the inner layers are more crystal than the outer one. And this incremental and layer growth make the dental calculus very rich and multi-layer record in ancient life. And while we still don't know why it happens and all the causes, the theology of the formation of this structure, it tends definitely to have like more calculus close to the salivary glands, and the factors are definitely like a constellation, a cooperation of diet, oral hygiene, and also genetics, definitely an environment enters into place. And the layer gives like this structure give a unique opportunity to understand not like a moment in time, but long-term dietary and living habits of ancient populations. So because of this like multi-layered formation, so we can get like a window that can cover a long period of the life of the individual. So as a calcium phosphate mineral deposits on the teeth, it preserves so a vast range of microorganisms. So we know that then by now the dental calculus can trap like hundreds of species of bacteria, viruses, fungi, food particles, and even microorganisms that come from upper and lower respiratory tracts. And this means that in both ancient and modern samples, these metrics, the dental calculus, can provide a detailed biographic information about the person's diet, health, and living conditions at different levels, of course. And the bacterial communities that are preserved in calculus can even tell more about the condition in which the person lived, whether he was exposed, for example, to certain occupation environmental hazards or pollutants. So by studying all these microorganisms, we can kind of piece together a picture of human environmental interaction that kind of makes much more sense, especially on the long duration. So we move now to the kind of and dental calculus and diet. So what can this metric tell us about the ancient diet? So today we will explore how the calculus reveal key aspects of ancient diet and also the intertwined role of food and medicine. And the presence of exotic plants, for example, that can reflect, because they've been found, that can reflect even ancient traits and cultural exchanges in prehistoric and even historical periods. So just to see this metric also in a more cultural and historical way for reconstructing global connections in the past. So if we exclude written sources, artifacts, and pictorial documents, we know that there are a number of other methods that are applied for reconstructing the diet and lifestyles in historical antiquity that provide important data about diet and non-dietary customs. But just to mention, as you can see in this slide here, some of the most well-known, of course, starting from archaeology, so fauna remains, botanical analysis, and even more direct approaches to human remains, like, for example, biomolecular approaches, such as the analysis of stable isotopes, the carbon, nitrogen, sulfur, like in teeth and bones, oral paleopatologies, and morphological analysis of bone remains, macro and micro wear enamel. Of course, they are all information that we can get from for the analysis of diet. Yet, in the last at least 15 years, the dental calculus, so the metrics that we are talking about, has started to prove as a very powerful and potential approach, as it traps and preserves a wide array of materials that at least once were present and kind of transient in the mouth. So it can be food, but even medicinal remains, medicinal compounds. So unlike bones or ceramics, it provides a direct, individualized record of what people actually chewed or ingested. So there is like a direct connection to the individual, and especially also because the formation works with the process that entails the saliva. This tells that what we can find is actually related to the life of the individual. So one of the most fascinating aspects of this analysis of the dental calculus is also the ability, for example, to preserve the phytoliths that are the silica deposits that are common in most of the plants, and even the starch granules that are polysaccharides that are stored in plants that are very important, that have been evolutionary important in our diet, that are important even today, that are stored in rhizomes, in seeds, in tubers, even in fruits. And this starch maintains their semi-crystalline nature throughout time. And this structure allows scientists to get to the identification, even because they are very variable in morphology, to a taxonomical precision, so based on the shape or on the size. And we know that starch foods include cereals, where actually the staple food, even in antiques, so is very has a high potential. Not to talk about pollens and environment and pollutants, and that we will see very, very soon. I think it's also interesting to know that dental calculus has also provided the first direct evidence of milk consumption in ancient populations through the identification of the beta-lactoglobulin, which is like a specific milk protein that is found in ruminants like cattle, sheep, and goat. And while in the Bronze Age, for example, there are studies that prove that in the Bronze Age samples, the presence of this beta-lactoglobulin in dental calculus confirms like widespread milk consumption. In Neolithic Britain, dental calculus is allowed to discover that suggests that the processing of dairy into form product like cheese, as this population lacked of lactose persistence. So genetic studies indicate that most Neolithic adults were lactose intolerant, but the presence of the beta-lactoglobulin in the dental calculus samples implies that they use fermentation to reduce lactose content, highlighting so adaptation in dairy consumption and food processing over time. Dental calculus has also contributed a lot to reveal historical exchanges, and to me this is an amazing piece of research that kind of focus and kind of point to traces, like how can we trace historical exchanges like beyond like sources. And remarkably, in southern Levant, it has the dental calculus analysis, like a multidisciplinary analysis on the same metrics, provided the earliest evidence in the Mediterranean for the consumption of exotic foods like soybean, banana, turmeric, plants that we know are native of the South and Southeast Asia. And this finding, like the one that they're reporting, this article are dated to the second millennium before Christ, suggesting actually the existence of well-established network of exchange during connecting South Asia and the Near East much, much earlier than we previously thought. So the presence of this non-native food in dental calculus not only challenges traditional views of Bronze Age trade, but also point to the exchange of culinary and medicinal practices, highlighting the cultural dimension of long-distance interaction. And this approach, I think, holds a great potential for the study of historical periods as well, because it can shed light on dietary globalization, trade routes, and cross-cultural influence in contexts where written records are limited or silent on the everyday consumption, for example. So beyond the notion of diet, as we understand it today, we come here to talk about health, lifestyle, and occupation. One theme is becoming very central to our ongoing research on dental calculus, which is the thin and shifting boundary between food and medicine in historical period, something that we are currently exploring in Rome within the Roman calculus PRIN project, actually, where we trying to kind of find markers of consumption of drug, stimulants, and even herbal remedies using like modern dental calculus samples, so to kind of get like systematic markers to then compare and use for interpretation in archaeological work. So, okay. In ancient Rome, this like thin and shifting boundary between food and medicine is very clear. Natural resources from animal and plants were extensively used not only for nutrition, but also for healing. And medicine were, like we know from sources, medicine were primarily based on herbs, natural substances, including nettle, mustard, asphodel, saffron, flax, barley, like all substances that we normally just categorize as food, laurel, salt, vinegar, oil, eggs, even watermelon juice. So a growing body of literature demonstrates the potential of dental calculus to illuminate pattern of health and food and medicine in historical period, just trying. And here comes the importance of like interdisciplinary work, as we will see, pointing together dental calculus, not only working alone, but in like concert, like integrating information from paleopathology, isotopes, like coming together to give sense to, of course, this distinction that we kind of see in dental calculus. And beyond diet, but still getting in touch with health, and with regards to environment and occupational practices and the relationship with all this, ancient dental calculus offers a valuable tool for detecting even the exposure to airborne pollutants of occupational origin. And this is unlike skeletal lesions, because the tartar preserve microresidues that were inhaled or trapped during this daily activity. So they are proving directly the evidence of respiratory irritants in ancient environments. So they create like the sort of link between activity and actually maybe absence even of skeletal lesion. So just even here, just to give you an example of recent articles that were, again, using dental calculus to kind of trigger this topic, I brought the example of the example of the Bronze Age site, in Eastern Mediterranean. They gave like actually the earliest known evidence of the use of lignite, so the brown coal, in the Eastern Mediterranean, and it's dated to the early Bronze Age. And the analysis that they carried out is like the thermal desorption, pyrolysis, gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, and also, again, interdisciplinarity, polarizing microscopy, so that research identified combustion biomarkers specific to lignite, wood, and dung. So these substances were likely used as fuel for pottery kilns, metalworking, and domestic fires during the second millennium BC. And the presence of combustion residues in dental calculus point to chronic low-level inhalation, particularly among individuals that probably were involved in specialized or craft labor, but at the same time, putting together other information, even from like a filthy environmental life tomb, for example. So this approach definitely can let us understand very easily how it opens up perspective on the impact of work environments on health and the early use of fossil fuels in complex societies. So last, but of course, and definitely not least, it's worth highlighting how ancient dental calculus analysis has not only transformed our understanding of diet, health, and cultural practices, but also open up new research frontiers into the human microbiome. And early studies focus on the identification of bacterial cells within the calcified matrix, but with the advent of high throughput sequencing, researchers began to recover the whole microbial communities, and this offered, of course, clues about the past lifestyles of the population and also movements between population. So like gut microbiota, oral microbiota communities can adapt to different subsistence strategies and make the dental calculus a key proxy for exploring even migration and mixtures and health in both prehistoric, as we have seen, for example, within my project, and also historical population. So happy to come back to the project, so the BioLila, and in order to do this, I wanted to show you a sort of overview, of the information that we have based on literature, because dental calculus analysis has been used a lot in prehistoric societies, of course, as an integration, because written sources are missing, so we're kind of looking for many kind of venues for which we can get information, but conducted as additional source of data for reconstructing diet in ancient historical population, this has been done less systematically. And although the potential of analyzing this sample is very high, there are not many case studies from historical periods that have been using this sort of techniques. And I have here kind of listed the most famous ones, as we can say. So, for example, the Roman inhabitants of Ager-Curensis community, but is dated to the imperial period, the late Roman population of Tarragona in Spain, and the early medieval population of Colonna, just going a bit further in time. So although not all these studies employ the same methodology, they have something, like a thin layer connecting them. All the analyses were conducted in an interdisciplinary manner, often incorporating anthropological analysis, marker of stress, malnutrition, oral paleopathology, and also isotopic studies and environmental information, and have reached very high information and very high resolution information, just comparing this kind of evidence. So finally, we arrived to the Biolalia, and this slide is just to acknowledge that this work was carried out in a strict collaboration between researchers of this community, as Alessandra pointed out before. And So we know that recent and multidisciplinary research has shown that during the 6th century, my prehistoric heritage of millennium century, crisis are significantly influenced by adverse climatic condition, and paleoclimatic data point to a marked deterioration of the Mediterranean climate, including glaciers advances, increased rainfall, major volcanic eruption, and this event led to what is referred as the late antique Little Ice Age, which spanned approximately from 536 to 660 year Anno Domini. So while this period is well documented from an environmental, archaeological, and historical perspective, it remains unexplored from a bioanthropological standpoint. Yet bioarchaeological data and dental calculus data can hold like a great potential for understanding, of course, complex relationship between the climate and the human lifeways during this period. And as a part of this project, we are investigating dental calculus just to analyze, like to complement actually even the paleopathological and the isotopic data that were for most already available to us. So diet in ancient Rome, ancient sources confirm that in early Roman period the diet was predominantly vegetarian based on cereals and legumes and were cultivated and stored in household pantries. And in the late imperial period, two major developments profoundly shaped Roman societies: the crisis of the empire and the rise of Christianity, and both this event contributed in different way to the reduction in food availability and abundance. Christian doctrine, for example, promoted values of poverty, simplicity, fasting, and increased consumption of fish, and had a significant impact in the trade practice. It also supported the diffusion of specific crops, like vineyards, due to the symbolic and ritual value of wine in religious community, in ceremonies. And the barbarians' invasions also further destabilized the already fragile structure of the Western Roman Empire. So cereal confirmed the foundation of the Roman diet, particularly the emmer wheat, the hull grain, which formed the flour and that they ate, and other varieties as ador and spelt were also consumed, with barley primarily used as fodder for horses. A common recipe for the Roman period was the polta, which is a sort of a porridge polenta prepared with spelt flour and boiled in water and salt. And it could also be made with barley flour, sometimes rich with flax seeds, added with a ratio of 3 and 1 for every 20 liters of barley and millet. So why I'm just summarizing this recipe? Summarizing it because all these ingredients could be identified by dental calculus. And not only that, through dental calculus and differently, for example, from DNA analysis, we can even touch kind of the culinary treatment, like the processing, like the way this food has been processed, like it's been ground, it's been completely transformed to flour, it's been boiled, it's been fermented. All these like treatments that are part of tradition can be followed by like even optical microscopy. So biological samples like spans 3 regions, Veneto, Lombardy, and Tuscany, for a total of 19 individuals. And shown in the table, the females are underrepresented and all individuals are adult, with one exception of a subadult. And as you can see, urban context characterized the northern regions, while rural occupations are present in the central Italy. And we will kind of discuss primarily those individuals that kind of gave some important results. Like here are the sites from Lombardy and Veneto: Como, Casteggio, Arcole, Povegliano Veronese, and Verona. So in the Lombardy region, published stable isotope data, although not from all and exact same sites, yet they have been published and offer a regional overview of dietary habits, This indicates a diet largely based on C4 plants with relatively low intake of animal proteins. However, some individuals saw value consistent with a stronger reliance on C3 plants, like tribe plants. In Veneto, previously published isotopic data together paint a picture of a mixed diet, both C3 and C4 plants that were consumed, and there are a relatively high intake of animal protein. Notably, C4 plants, such as millet, were cultivated for human consumption, not just as animal fodder. And dental calculus analysis revealed the presence of millet, storage and barley and wheat, legumes and fungal spores as well that can be traced very, very nicely in dental calculus, which are probably related to food preservation, storage practices, and even juniper residues, which might reflect use of cooking tools and medicinal context. So this, our results, shows that at Como, isotopic data indicate a diet primarily based on C4 plants, with the exception of 4 individuals who show more negative delta 13 carbon values, suggesting greater access to C3 plants resources. And among them, there is one individual which has carbon and nitrogen values, which could point to a slightly different protein intake. Of course, we conducted analysis on one individual only, which could, for example, explain the discrepancy between the isotopic and dental calculus, because of course the absence of an evidence, of course, doesn't mean that the evidence is not there. It's probably not evident in that precise scale of dental calculus. Another, again from Casteggio, individual was affected by various pathology and poor oral hygiene, yet it didn't give a lot of information, and in this case, of course, the availability of the simple individual might be the reason why we cannot be more precise. Different situation we have in Verona. So already published isotopic data from these burials suggests a diet with significant contribution for C4 plant combined with protein primarily from terrestrial animals. However, this individual 667, who has 67, stands out with more negatives delta 13 carbon values, which suggests greater reliance on C3 plant products, and his nitrogen value indicates a moderate intake of animal protein, and paleopathological evidence shows a diffuse mechanical degeneration in both limbs and spine. Also in this individual, we found only woody fibers, but in abundance. So just keep this in mind, because this woody fiber and environmental fiber in dental calculus will come back very, very often in this analysis. A different condition seems to characterize the individual 666. Based on published literature, we know that the delta 13 values and the delta 15 nitrogen indicates a diet with a strong contribution from C4 plants and moderate intake of animal proteins. Where our analysis actually highlights the C3 contribution in diet in this individual, with this triticale tribe starch still trapped in the dental calculus. From a paleopathological standpoint, this individual shows a vertebral osteoarthritis in the upper thoracic region, likely the results of mechanical stress or age-related degeneration. Another case study from northern Italy, Archeologici. In this individual, a male aged between 35 and 50 years, buried in an urban context, dental calculus revealed C4, starch granules, plant fibers, vegetal residues, suggesting a diet rich in plant-based food, including raw and processed material. It is interesting to notice that it's not actually visible very well here, but this individual shows a scale fragment that has been identified in the dental calculus, suggesting actually fish consumption. So especially for these ancient individuals, more recent in time, the possibility for the preservation of meat from fish and
terrestrial animals, as well as like scales, for example, for fish, is good. So we can even kind of have this information preserved. Another individual from Povegliano Veronese, a woman from 35-50 years, who was also bearing in urban context, and dental calculus revealed plant fibers, vegetal residues, pointing to a routine exposure to plant-based material, either through diet or possibly domestic and craft activities. The woman also suffered, I need to say that, from a form of congenital spinal anomaly, and also from osteoarthritis affecting the spine and peripheral joints. And the combination of this condition and the dental calculus remains suggests like possible limited mobility, and raises the hypothesis that she might have performed stationary work, possibly even using her teeth to assist manual activities involving textile at home. Povegliano Veronese, another male, also interned in urban environment. Dental calculus like recovers C4 plant starch, C4 starch, plant fibers, plant residues in general, pointed to a very rich plant diet, and the skeleton displays a mild criba orbitalia on the right orbit, which is associated with metabolic stress or nutritional deficiency. In Tuscany, we are introducing the focus on two sites that we have been working on, San Genesio and Padova, and isotopic and dental calculus data of these sites allow for exploring regional variability, complementing, of course, the data that we got for the northern Italy. So we have for these sites already published isotopic data from even various other sites, offering a general overview suggesting the growing role of C4 plants in this region. And dental calculus analysis, however, provides like a more detailed picture. For instance, at the site of Padova, individuals consume a large amount of meat, particularly from cattle and sheep, with no major dietary difference from men and women. And these are published data. When it comes to the data coming from San Genesio, for example, individuals from aged from 50 to 70 was bearing a rural context, and the dental calculus revealed C4 starch, fibers, a lot of wood, residues, charcoal, and spore from Gomlaceae family. And this diversity of remains and the presence of fungal spores suggests really poor hygiene and prolonged exposure to airborne particulates. And the skeletal marker also include chronic maxillary sinusitis, reflecting environmental exposures or limited oral care in or later life. Another woman from San Genesio, 40 to 6 years, her dental calculus contains starch and plant fibers, suggesting plant-based diet. And there is a lot of fibrous exposure to fibers. Like in previous individual, she also suffered from conical sinusitis, and she had also a fused thoracic vertebra, and evidence of the use of teeth as a tool, suggesting again limited mobility and habitual activities involving her mouth and involving probably plant and wooden matters. San Genesio, another female, 35 to 6 years, exhibited calculus with wood, again that comes back, and fiber residues, and again linking to domestic or craft activities. And also her skeleton shows the chronic sinusitis, and oral health was poor with dental caries, periodontal disease as intensive wear, and the use of teeth as a sort of a third hand, in particular the anterior one. So this is a second female in the same sample with sinusitis, raising the question about female exposure to smoke or maybe poor indoor air, perhaps like sitting near to cook fires or getting like some activities done in this environment. Another individual from San Genesio, a male, 35 to 50 years, dental calculus reveals starch, fiber, and possibly traces of animal skin, suggesting interaction with both dietary and occupational material. He exhibited criba orbitalia and also criba femora, sign of anemia and metabolic stress. So, which could reflect a long-term nutritional and environmental stress in subsistence setting. This is the last individual, like from Padova, that released like results, a male of 50 years, bearing in the rural context, with the calcula contained plant fibers and vegetal parenchyma, so xylem from wood, and his skeleton revealed complex pathologies, among which, like, for example, the chronic sinusitis. His condition underscored the effect of genetic disorders and nutritional instability. So I'm coming up to sort of summarizing discussing the result. So the isotopic analysis and dental calculus from late antique Little Ice Age Roman population definitely reveal a complex and regional variable dietary landscape. So while historical sources emphasize a diet centered on cereals, oil, wine, and protein from meat, legume, and fish, the isotope data provide a more nuanced picture with C3 plants such as wheat or barley that were dietary staple across the Roman period, while C4 plants were generally less common. However, isotopic signal C4 plants consumption emerge more clearly in rural contexts, particularly when investigated through dental calculus, where these plants are more visible, like even can be identified in specifically. Of course, our limited sample seemed to confirm the commonly held assumption of an homogeneous Roman diet without significant differences emerging between urban and rural population. However, the only difference seems to pertain to non-dietary remains found in different archaeological contexts, and this emerged very clearly in the rural Tuscany, especially in Padova and San Genesio, where the presence of wood-derived residues in dental calculus is actually striking. And these findings may relate to biomechanical stress markers observed in certain individuals and possibly linked to intensive labor or exposure to pollutants from specialized activities which involved the wood. And it's interesting to note that the same individual also exhibit signs of chronic maxillary condition, like sinusitis, identified at least in 3 cases in San Genesio and associated with prolonged inhalation of particulates. So although, of course, we understand that this is a preliminary study based only on 19 individuals, and I repeat, of whom just 10 yielded informative dental calculus data, the results are actually promising and support a value for further investigation, especially of the relationship between diet, occupation, environmental exposure, and pathologies, especially through integration of additional methods to kind of make this information kind of talk together. And future research and collaboration should aim to expand the sample size, of course, to reinforce this initial observation and allow for a more detailed exploration of social status and its reflection in dietary and health pattern, but also mobility dynamic, potentially inferred from dietary differences and their underlying motivation, like forced or economic. We have to say that they come also something to reflect about, like on the combined results of isotope and dental calculus and paleopathology also could be could provide insights into the provenance of these C4 plants, for example, to kind of test their potential use not only as food, but maybe their relationship with medicinal resources, especially in this kind of climatic condition and in presence of all these paleopathological condition of the individual analyzed. So thank you very much, and I hope you will have like questions, or we can do a bit of a discussion maybe later about. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Emanuela, for this super insightful talk, and we will have time for discussion at the end of this first session. Now I invite here to the stage our next speaker, Veda Mikasinovic from the University of Belgrade, talking about the skeletal signs of early life stress in the post-Lelia period, 7th to 9th century AD, evidence from the Gornje Silovo necropolis, Serbia.
I'm glad to be here with you today. First of all, just a few words about myself. I'm coming from Serbia and I'm a PhD student at the Faculty of Medicine in Belgrade. The main focus of my PhD thesis is actually cranial protic lesions. Therefore, I will talk about these pathological changes as well as skeletal signs of early life stress in post-Lalia period, which we analyzed on skeletal remains from the other necropolis from Serbia. In the fact, we wanted to find out and to investigate what happened to Asian populations in post-Lalia period, or actually to explore how the Asian populations, such as ours, adapted to new circumstances. At the very beginning, skeletal signs of early life stress reflect disruption in normal growth and development due to physiological stressors. And in the bioanthropological literature, these skeleton signs are defined as non-specific indicators of physiological stress developed in early life and can remain visible throughout adulthood. Actually, these skeleton signs usually form or manifested through cranial protic lesions on the cranial vault or orbital roof, as well as on the parts of the postcranial skeletons, and through linear enamel hypoplasia. These pathological changes are often been documented in skeletal materials, and they are can be used for reconstruction of past health and living conditions, primarily because all of these skeletal manifestation can represent evidence of poor health in past populations, from chronic disease or chronic systemic infections, actually, heavy parasite loads, food insecurity, or inadequate dietary diversity. At the very beginning, protic lesions described as pathological changes affecting the outer surface of the cortical bone, characterized by pits and pores or holes. These lesions can form on the parts of the cranial vault and orbital roof, as I said earlier, as well as on the part of the postcranial bone, such as femoral and humeral neck. In the term of cranial protic lesions, they are defined as indicator of non-specific stress experienced in childhood, mainly associated with different nutritional needs and deficiency. And actually, this skeletal manifestation characterized by the presence of the numerous small holes, typically 1 millimeter or less in diameter, that penetrate the outer surface of the orbital roof or the parts of the cranial bone. In that case, they typically found symmetrically distributed adjacent to the lamboid or sagittal cranial sutures. In the literature, they are actually defined as a good indicator of health and nutritional status in Asian populations. So the analysis of these skeletal manifestation could help in the reconstruction of health, disease, condition, and lifestyle in Asian population. Cranial protic lesions manifested or this lesion can be formed into types such as criberorbitalia and protohyperostosis. Criberorbitalia is defined as sieve-like or honeycomb-like lesions near the anterior rim of the orbit, or more precisely, they manifested osteological condition characterized by porosity and thinning of the outer surface of the orbital roof. In the term of protohyperostosis, this skeletal manifestation actually actually has similar macroscopic appearance, but this lesion can form on the parts of the outer surface of the cortical bone on the cranial vault, especially on the parietal bones, occipital, and rarely frontal bone. Also, in the literature along protohyperostosis, there are also cited cribercrani externa, symmetrical osteoporosis, spongy hyperostosis, and so on. And all of these can represent actually the same manifestation. However, despite numerous papers regarding cranial protic lesions, there is confusion regarding terminology. So some authors actually equated criberorbitalia and protohyperostosis, or other can or others suggest that these two skeletal manifestations can represent same manifestation caused by same condition. Or criberorbitalia can represent initial stage of severe form of anemia that can further and spread on the cranial vault. In the term of postcranial protic lesion, this skeletal manifestation has been less researched compared to cranial protic lesions, and they are formed, as I said, on the femoral and humeral neck in the form of cribra femoris and cribra humeralis. And in the literature, this skeletal manifestation may result from high growth rates and anemia, since these areas of long bones are more susceptible to thinning and creating porosity as a result of pressure by hyperplastic bone marrow in anemic children. And the last skeleton signs of early life stress is related to disorders in the amylogenesis process that cause various defects in quality and or mineralization that lead in hypoplasticity or hypermineralization. These defects may be inherited or may arise as a result of physiological systemic disorders associated with altered skeletal manifestation, altered skeletal mineralization pathways, which may be manifested by a hypoplastic enamel layer. And this manifestation can represent in the form of grooves, accentuated lesions, irregular pits, or furrows. But the main or the most represent signs of these disorders is linear enamel hypoplasia, and they are actually manifested by horizontal planes or deeper bands of depression that extend along the outer surface of the teeth, actually mostly on canines and incisors. Also, in the bioanthropological literature, there is a little bit confusion, or not confusion, but there is definitely complex etiology related to these skeleton signs. But also they are, all of these, or most of these, defined as non-specific skeletal indicators of physiological stress, which can be caused by different diseases or conditions, primarily with anemia, but also cited other possible reasons such as infections, trauma, neoplasms, metabolic disorders, and so on. Some authors suggest that there is not a single cause, but rather multiple etiologies which can overlap. Or in the case of cribrobitalian portychiporostosis, these skeletal manifestations have represent different, can be caused by different etiologies. Why is the study of skeleton science of early life stress is so important for osteologists and bioanthropologists? First, these skeletal manifestations represent the most frequent pathological condition which could be easily identified on skeletal remains. And these lesions are considered useful to test general health status in archaeological population, especially of non-adults, primarily because all of these lesions can be caused by, can be related to early life stress or And in the literature, they are defined as a indicator of human health or life quality. And once again, these skeleton manifestation can help in the reconstruction of health, disease patterns, lifestyle, and everyday habitual activities in the Asian population. According to all of these, and for the purpose of this study, there are three main aims. Firstly, is to present the result of bioanthropological and paleopathological analysis of skeleton science of early life stress from archaeological population from our period. Then to analyze the incidence of all of these skeletal markers and to analyze their correlation and distribution according to age and biological sex. In order to achieve all of these goals, we perform bioanthropological analysis on skeletal remains from Site 40, Potezgornje silo, which is located in Novi Sad, in Bačka district, or actually on the northern part of Serbia. The protective archaeological excavation of this site was carried out from 2012-2015, when 197 graves were discovered with well-preserved skeletal remains. According to grave goods, burial practices, as well as unpublished archaeological reports, this necropolis was dated to 7th to 9th century AD, and it was attributed to middle and late our period. Bioanthropological analysis was conducted in the Center of Bone Biology at the Faculty of Medicine in Belgrade, and it involved estimation of age at the moment of death and estimation of biological sex, but only for adults, by using standard procedures, as well as paleopathological analysis, which include gross examination of each skeleton, but the special focus was on identification, classification, and analysis of cranial and postcranial porotic lesions and linear enameloid population. In the case of complete absence of the skull, orbits, or femoral humerus, due to poor preservation, we excluded these cases for our analysis. Our analysis were included 199 individuals, and among them 90 individuals, or 45%, were non-adults, and 109 belong to adult population. Among adult population, 47 belong to males and 48 belong to females, And in only 14 cases, we were not we were unable to establish biological sex primarily due to poor preservation. In all investigated population, we noted almost 70% of and different kind of pathological lesions, and interestingly, we noted a high percent of this lesion in both biological sexes as well as in non-adults. But according age distribution showed that the pathological changes were mostly affect non-adults up to 5 years, as well as adult age 26 to 44 years. As I said, the special focus was investigation of cranial porotic lesions. So, Cribra Britalia analysis will include 137 individuals, and among them, we noted 45% of Cribra Britalia. While in the case of protohyperostosis, the skulls were better preserved compared to orbits, and we, among investigated population, or actually part of population, we noted 23% of porotic hyperostosis. More detailed analysis show that Cribra Britalia mostly uniformly present in both orbits, but we noted only 3 active forms, while in the case of protohyperostosis, they are affected multiple bones, but mostly parietal bones. As you can see, both skeletal manifestation were more pronounced in non-adults, but interestingly, we noted a higher percent in male population. It's similar with distribution by age, but in the case of postcranial porotic lesion, we noted only 1 case of healed cribra humeral, and we noted 18% of cribra femoris, and mostly we noted bilaterally representation of cribra femoris. Mostly cribra femoris mostly affected female population, and in the case of age distribution, we noted higher percentage of these pathological changes in adults, but also in non-adults. And the last, in the case of linear enamel hypoplasia, we noted 45% of this skeletal manifestation in investigated population, and they mostly affect incisors and canines. And we noted equally represented in both sexes, but less, this manifestation less common in non-adults. To summarize, we noted high mortality rates in non-adults, and we noted high percent of postcranial lesions, primarily in adults, but with high prevalence in male population. This is a little bit similar with postcranial porotic lesions and linear enamel hypoplasia. According to all of these, we can conclude that early life stress experienced in childhood was not fatal for the majority of population, and the individual adequately adapted to acquired conditions and successfully survived these phases. And skeletal markers of early life stress, especially in non-adults, indicate the detrimental impact of environmental and social challenges during the post-Lalia period. And the last conclusion is the prevalence of skeleton lesions such as primarily cribra britalia, linear enamel hypoplasia highlights the vulnerability of a certain members of the community to the prolonged effects of climatic and health disturbance during the 6th century. And that's it.
Thank you, Vedam, for your talk. And now we jump to the last speaker of this first session. The talk is, did women children suffer more in the 6th century Europe? Bioarchaeological insights from the chicken necropolis in northern Spain, and thanks to the new speaker, Ksenia Đukić from the University of Belgrade.
First of all, it's not like I prefer this kind of equipment during presentation. However, I understand that it's necessary. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Ksenia Đukić, and I'm a researcher from Faculty of Biology, University of Belgrade. And today I will present some of the results of a first phase of the project, our national project of our faculty. And the main topic of the project basically is first pandemic, or if you like, Justinian plague. So our focus is basically 6th and 7th and 8th century, and we are trying to chase pathogen, Asian pathogen of plague. However, due to some internal circumstances in Serbia, currently we just postpone our sending of our samples, and that's the reason why Veda and I today just present results of basic bioanthropological analysis. My focus today will be just on women and children, not because male population did not suffer and did not experience circumstances of 6th century Europe, but because they are recognized as a more vulnerable or if you like, sensitive part of population, and maybe they can be more illustrative to chase some circumstances that were present in societies and in that population. So brief introduction of this presentation. I will just go across the whole presentation. I will present you results of bioanthropological and paleopathological analysis from the Cheek necropolis. As I mentioned, we will of course include all parts of anthropological results that are used to be presented. I will try at the end of presentation to look closely into cultural or environmental circumstances that can be behind the results, and I will share with you our future plans for this research. Archaeological site of Cheek is located in North Serbia, in Vojvodina province, in Bačka district, nearby to the tiny city of Bečej. This archaeological site was excavated on few occasions during previous century. It started as protective excavations, however, continued as a systematic excavations. And we are speaking about necropolis with total amount of, I don't know, 130 or plus excavated graves. Here on this slide, you can see a cover page of the only book published regarding archaeological material from this site, and based on the opinion of our colleagues that excavated and analyzed archaeological material or grave goods from this site. This site it can be dated in the period of 6th century AD, and it is attributed to belong to our cultural circle, early ours. And I would like to point out that on the territory of Serbia, we do not have early, much necropolis which can be related with early Avar period. So this is on some way precious material for us. And just a few words about Avars. They arrived on the territory of Pannonian Plain in 6th century. They were nomadic population. They spent 2 centuries and a half on this land. They had a state, they established state, and the name of the state was Keginate. The ruler was a Kegin, and he was supported by entourage of very, very powerful or warriors, if you like. And what is very, very important to be noted that others in European historical literature, others are recognized as horse riders, as warriors, and basically they spend their lives on the horseback. At the same time, there are some analogies with Hans, and just for you to a bit close to you the story about ours. There is one of the most famous historians from Vienna, who is who is basically historian for this period and for this population. And on the cover page of his book titled "The Others," he wrote something like, "They were savage people whose life is war." But we will see if skeletal evidence are in accordance with that quote. And what about others in Serbia? Here you can see, I think it's in blue. In blue, you can see part of the Keginate, which is currently located in modern-day Serbia. And on the other pictures, you can see pins with necropolis discovered within Vojvodina province in Serbia. The red one are those who were with bioanthropological analysis. So we have a huge corpus of material which is not proceeded on the right way, or which is not proceeded at all currently in Serbia. And what about Cheek and the archaeological surrounding of the Cheek? I just want to point out that nearby to Cheek there is some other necropolis, Pionirska ulica. It can be dated in the similar, I don't want to say same period, but a similar period. And we have two, Perlek and Botra, we have two basically settlements that are based on the relative chronology, dated a bit later. However, my assumption is that it should be reanalyzed. Maybe they can be somehow connected with the Cheek necropolis. And one more information for you regarding Cheek necropolis is that even though we started with relative dates for Cheek necropolis within a project, we took I don't know how many samples for C14, and it is confirmed that the skeletons that were buried in Cheek necropolis belongs to the 6th century. And Europe in the 6th century CA, it's something very special, I assume. And in a blue window, you can see a set of social circumstances that were very present in 6th century Europe. However, from, I would say, biological point of view, Justinian plague and Lalia were something that was very present and probably very influential from everyday life point of view. And here you can see we prepare some percentage of grave goods present in grave in order to try to reconstruct economy and activity patterns that can be expected to be present in Cheek population. And as we expected, it's not like they were, I don't know, warriors, some very dangerous warriors. They were mostly rural population with crafting activities, hunting and fishing and so on. So archaeological material from the graves suggests to us that they lived peacefully everyday rural life without lots of warfare activities. And given that we had some information, some pieces of information regarding analysis of grave goods, and here we are presenting basically risk, activity, and injury risk based on the archaeological material. So, economy, main part of the Czech economy was agrarian affairs, followed by craft activities, and just a small percentage of probably warfare activities. And given that it could be expected that we have injuries of lower legs and forearms, followed by hands and forearms, and of course upper limbs, skull, spine, and so on. And these data are basically from the clinical literature, current clinical literature in the circumstances of agrarian population and so on. So the main injury risk basically in Czech population was accident or interpersonal violence. The anthropological analysis was conducted on Faculty of Medicine, and here you can see just some methodological quotes like methodological approach. Of course, we use standard methodological procedures which are well established worldwide. And as a part of bioanthropological analysis, firstly, we perform analysis of preservation of skeletal remains, estimation of biological sex, age, paleopathological analysis, and so on. And on this slide, you can see distribution of age on this necropolis. So we have a high percentage of individuals in early life age cohorts. But it should be noted that also among adults, we have a significant number of, let's say, seniors in Czech population. On this slide, you can see distribution of biological sex, almost equal representation of female and females and males. We have just a small percentage of the individuals in which, due to poor preservation, we were not able to establish the biological sex. And I forgot to tell that the total amount of available skeletons for the analysis was 102. On this slide, you can see distribution of biological sex across age cohorts, and I would like just to point out that in this age cohort up to 60 years of age, we have a significant number of females, so just a few males were present in this age cohort. And why I decided to present you just the two parts of paleopathological analysis regarding female population. Why? Because we can follow some patterns when we're speaking about degenerative changes and trauma patterns. That's the reason why I represent you just, it's not like we neglected the other pathological condition. I just choose to present just these parts of paleopathological analysis. So among degenerative changes, of course, were present in both females and males. However, we have a higher percentage of degenerative changes among female population, or to be precise, we have more females suffer from degenerative changes in total sample. And here you can see some examples of degenerative changes of skeletal remains. And just to point out that, of course, we have some arthritic changes and so on in knee and rest of the skeleton, but the most present were degenerative changes of spine among female population. Now we are going to the story about trauma patterns, and it is very, very, very interesting that among a whole set of data, trauma patterns were present in 50.7%, and they were more present in postcranial skeleton comparing to cranial skeleton. And this is not something which is, I don't know, which is very interesting, I would say. But on the next few slides, I will show you trauma patterns caused by probably some violent events on women from chick. So on this slide, you can see two examples of trauma patterns, cranial trauma patterns. First one, so the upper one is basically caused by some sharp object, weapon, or something like that. And the other one is blunt force trauma of frontal bone. In both cases, we are speaking about females. And just to point out that both of these traumas were very well healed without any traces of some accompanying situation like infection or so on. And these ladies lived with these scars for years. Here you can see example of a young girl, so 8 years old girl, so also with blunt force trauma on the cranium, and why I put this that we have a biological sex as a consequence of Asian DNA analysis. That's reason because we decided not to do estimation of biological sex for non-adults, except in the case when we have opportunity to use DNA for that. And on this slide, you can see one trauma of ulna, of distal part of ulna, which can be consequence of some kind of defense on one female from the cheek necropolis. And I just don't want to neglect the rest of the traumas on the male population. So you can here you can see one trauma of clavicle and one rib from the right side. I can't see. I think it's a right side, and this is a basically consequence of some accident, not some violent event. And to summarize this part of presentation regarding trauma patterns, among whole traumas in chick population, almost half of them belongs to female population, and among whole traumas in female population, we can say that the mechanism of injury in almost every case was some violent event. And that the children were not spared from this kind of injuries in chick population. To look closely what is going on with non-adults in chick population, of course, we analyzed early stress markers on skeletons such as cliver orbitalia, porotic lesions, and linear animal hypoplasia. And we have some I would say expected results, but just to look closely into this age cohort between newborn and 3 years of age. So we have a relatively high percentage of skeletal signs of early childhood stress in this age cohort, which is in literature in vast majority cases is interpreted to be a consequence of immune system is not set up on the level on which it should be in the first years of life. So that's the reason why they suffered a lot from early childhood stress. Of course, there are some alternatives which, according to my opinion, are more or less true, but this is something which is present in literature for I don't know how many last decades. And in children population, we had 5 cases of scurvy, and 2 cases of rickets, and this scurvy we had 4 cases in age cohort between 4 and 7 years of age. And here you can see just some examples of the porotic lesions that are very, very characteristics for scurvy in skeletal remains. And we have this case of hydrocephalus. So for sure, in a grave number 117, we have a child with, let's say, big head. But the differential diagnosis for hydrocephalus is it's a challenge. It's a truly challenge, and in that circumstances, I just want to show you kids in the same age from the same necropolis, and the shape and I would say just the shape of a skulls, and you can see that there is something regarding this skull. Generally speaking, we can say that it's hydrocephalus, but the theology and the circumstances in which this was discovered, we can't discuss. And this point and on this level of knowledge, I just want to point out that the kid was buried completely regular on the regular part of the necropolis without any destruction regarding funeral practice. And conclusional remarks. Regarding population lived in such a tumultuous time in Europe. They lived a peacefully life. They had relatively good life quality because the percentage of mortality of children was not so high. And morbidity patterns also are not signals for some very bad life qualities. But what is interesting according to my opinion, all fractures in this necropolis are well healed. It seems that someone somehow, I don't know how, treated them, and they had some specialized person within village society, population, community. I'm trying to be politically correct. I'm not sure about your standpoint regarding that. So they had someone who treated them when we are speaking about fractures. And when we are speaking just about children population, we noted one blunt force trauma on a young girl. We can say that children suffered from this kind of injury. That we noted early life stress with high percentage among youngest. We have a presence of metabolic diseases suggesting not so good quality of life. And we have this challenge, one case of potentially hydrocephalus. We have to see what shall we do with that case. And regarding female population, we have a higher frequency of injuries caused by violence in female population compared to male population. We have a higher percentage of degenerative changes in female population, especially in spine, comparing to male population, which can be a signal of some occupational background of this result. And we have a high percentage of females over 60 years of age. So even though it seems they work hard and potentially fight with someone or were beaten, they survived. Thank you very much.
Okay, there is now time for questions for this first session. So I would ask the speakers, so Veda and as well as Professor Emanuela Cristiani, to join us here on the stage. Is there any comments or questions for this first session before moving to the coffee break? So any comments and questions?
First of all, thank you very much for the talks, very interesting. And I have a specific question for Emanuela Cristiani, which, I mean, I have been listening to your presentation, which it has been very illustrative because I knew quite a bit about dental calculus, but I've never heard such nice summary about the different kind of analysis that you can conduct on this material. And my question would be, I mean, you have explained these specific cases linked to the Biolalia project, describing the pathologies and the materials found. Is it possible to get to the level of quantifying the amount of residues in a way that you could say this individual has much more grain than the other one? Is it possible, or is it just too speculative?
Thanks for the question. Is it possible? But the problem is that it's not a systematic answer you get, in the sense that if you get for, I don't know, like every individual the same amount of calculus, then you could like say this has more than other. So on a population level, you can make some sort of quantification. On a personal level, not, especially because you cannot control the formation of the dental calculus. So, for example, why you have, I say you, but someone else has more dental calculus than I have, for example. So there are like a personal and other very many reasons that produce the dental calculus, so allow one individual to get more than another. So it's always not systematic. At the same time, if you mean like, can I count how much remains I get, for example, 10 starches to it? Yes, I can. But in order to understand, you should have the more calculus you can from molars, for example. But again, it's not, I don't know what kind of comparative results you can get. It's not systematic like you can say a presence, you can say an abundance if you have on a population level. But at the same time, for example, the opposite, like the absence of something, doesn't mean that, for example, that person didn't eat or didn't. So it's in this way, it's sort of qualitative. In this way, it's not definitely. Yeah, there are in a way some problems, but I don't know whether I got completely your question or.
Yeah, you got it. I was asking if the results you were showing, which are much more based on presence, absence, or in this qualitative assessment, this was the typical kind of analysis, and what I was just imagining, which is going to more quantitative and actually doing comparisons with the amount of specific residues that you can find, was something that could be ambition. But I think that you have answered to me very well that there are way too many variables to control that.
Yeah,
that's not possible.
That maybe it could be a bit more for antiquity, because you can get more dental calculus than from prehistoric, for example, population. So maybe if you have individual that you can get like more samples or a bigger amount, then you can get on a population level a higher resolution results. Yeah.
I have a more general question, always to Manuela, and then another one, but first of all, very generally, not on these samples, but very generally, you said, because it's so new and we want to know more about this, you said that dental calculus depends on many different aspects, mainly, or among the main ones, genetic, health, dental health or dental cleaning a bit,
and hygiene, let's say,
and diet. My question is, because we saw some individuals have more tartaro than others. Is it possible? Because I asked my dentist, but she compares with today and it's not clear. Is it possible that lower status individuals with poorer diet have less dental calculus?
It might be. Again, it's like you cannot control that, because even today, high status, or people that anyway just have a correct oral hygiene get dental calculus. So it's not like cause effect, but at the same time, yes, the diet may be based on less contribution. For example, certain foods can have more presence of dental calculus, yes, it could be.
Poorer is not worse, but in this case,
For us, yeah. Yeah, but yeah.
good. And another question, very quickly. I think I wrote it because I forget later. On the 6th century cemetery of the Avars, okay? I didn't understand quite good the context, if it is a village or whatever. I would like to know more about the status of this community. And second thing, I already saw that you not have problems, but you include the uncertainty of chronology, because yours is 6th century, but there is another one which is 6th, 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th. So there's a big problem on our project, the dating of this. Do you think, is it possible to say something about health and whatever in a period which just lasted 100 years? Because we are talking about 6th century, Lalia, 6th century, but we know that Lalia starts in 535. So it's half of the 6th century, not the whole 6th century. And we don't know when it finishes, but some author says medieval warm period starts already in the middle of the 7th or 8th. So it's a very short period. With your experience in your data, do you think Lalia had something to do there? Or another thing, have you controlled by botanics and other information if Lalia had any impact in that territory? Because we know that this Lalia period had different impact in different areas of Europe. So today, even, we know it's a warm period and whatever, but there are some places in Spain that continue raining, and it had never rained before. Other are more drought, other are colder, or are warmer. How was it in your area?
Thank you for your question. First part of question is regarding if they were from rural or urban settlement. Our necropolis, ours left a huge archaeological heritage on the territory of Europe. However, in Serbia, we are dealing just with necropolis. Why? Because they had the settlements without solid materials, and we do not have, we have just a few examples that it could be settlement from that period. And that's the reason why I presented a short analysis of grave goods from activity point of view. So according to my opinion, they were rural population. There is no some signals that they belong to some rural population. We in Serbian traditional literature, our archaeologists or historians suggest to us that Serbian territory, modern day Serbian territory, basically was periphery of the Khaganate of our state. But what is a center? So we should ask a question: where is the center? According to my archaeological opinions, the center was in one village in Serbia, so it was not periphery from that point of view, but from geographical, regional point of view, it was periphery, south of the Khaganate. That's the first part. And the second part, so Lalia was for sure present in the time when these people lived. However, we have a very poor set of data regarding Lalia in that part of Europe, I would say, especially in the population like Great Migration period. You know, when you are dealing with historical circumstances in Roman Empire, doesn't matter if it is Eastern one or West one, you have I would say a rich set of historical sources that it can be used. When you are dealing with Barbaricum, you have a problem with that. Lalia was present for sure. We do not have enough data, and my intuition was to start with the Justinian plague,
because in literature death events are somehow connected. There are some opinions that Lalia was accelerator for Justinian plague or something like that, or even good circumstances in which disease can be spread on such a wide region and so on. So this is just a first piece of information about Lalia in Vojvodina province, and we started with Justinian plague to do huge amount of isotope analysis, of Asian DNA analysis, lots of skeletons to see if we can have some signals and some information about Lalia. It was a long answer.
Any other questions? Oh, okay.
Thank you. Now for
Okay, thank you. You mentioned you were going to do like continuing analysis, and I was curious what your plans were for additional analyses at the site.
You're asking me. Thank you for your question. We are continue with analysis of infection diseases, but not just from morphological point of view. We are chasing pathogen. We have a huge national project, and we have cooperation with Max Planck, of course, here in Europe. We have a huge amount of samples that should be sent, but as I mentioned, we have some circumstances in Serbia currently. We are under strike and blockades, and we are not able to send samples, but I'm looking forward to send them and to see results. But our first intention is to chase infection disease and to see if we can follow some cultural mechanisms or environmental mechanisms that can be connect or linked, if you like, with infection diseases.
Thank you for all the.
yes,
another question?
Yes, another question about this important, interesting cemeteries of medieval Serbia. My question is related with the before question. Is about the presence of tuberculosis. We have some cases of tuberculosis in the Lalia periods and after in this necropolis.
According to my knowledge, there is no any case, at least morphological presence of skeletal signs of tuberculosis in this period. But I cannot say that after pathogen analysis, maybe we can see something new. By now, there is no any single case of tuberculosis or some great infection disease like syphilis or something like that in this context. I don't know. They look in Serbian literature. We used to say that they were very healthy, even though we are analyzing cemetery, they died, so they were not healthy. But according to skeletal remains, from our point of view, they lived good life.
Thank you. Okay, welcome to this second section of the meeting. And my name is Antonio Fornaciari. I'm part of the team unit of the University of Pisa, and I have the pleasure of chairing this section. This section is particularly interesting, in my opinion, because in this section we develop some topics of the Biolalia project and PRIN, and then we have the possibility to observe some result of this research. Without further delay, let me to introduce our first speaker. Please, Alessandra Mazzucchi from University of Padua, that present a contribution with the title Morphological and Pathological Consideration of Medieval Skeletons in Northern Italy during the Lalia.
Okay. This presentation aims to present the preliminary data on the biological profile and hill status obtained from the analysis of skeletal remains for early medieval sites
in the Veneto and Lombardy regions. This research is part of the PRIN 2022 project Biolalia Bioarchaeology of Climate Change, an investigation of the late antiquity, Little Ice Age, LELIA, a joint initiative at University of Padua and Pisa. The primary objective of this study is to investigate skeletal markers that can be linked to the climatic change that occurred during the late antiquity Little Ice Age in the 6th and 7th century. To date, 9 sites are currently under investigation and an additional 7 are undergoing review, bringing the total to 16 sites. Several of these sites exhibit extended chronological spans, facilitating both diachronic and synchronic analysis. This allows for the comparison of pathologies and demographic patterns between individuals living during the 6th and 7th century and those from the immediately succeeding centuries. At present, comparisons are being drawn between the 6th, 7th century cohort and later period, reflecting the available chronologies of the analyzed sites. However, this research will be expanded to include a comparison with preceding centuries. A total of 322 individuals have been analyzed, 155 of whom belong to the 6th, 7th century period. The archaeological context under examination in the Veneto region include, for 6th and 7th centuries, Arcole, Povegliano Veronese, località Croce, and several sites within the city of Verona: Arena Via Loncino, Via Duomo, Via Pigna, Corso Cavour, Via Oberdan, Via Cantore. For subsequent centuries, Monselice. In Lombardy, the 6th and 7th century sites are Brescia Capitolium, Monterotondo, Covo, Bellinzana locality, Bariano, Convent of Neveri, and Casteggio, Via Anselmi. For subsequent centuries, Calcesepio. Notably, Monterotondo, Arena, and Bariano here remains from both the 6th century and the later period. The select sites encompass urban and rural secting with a prevalence of hillside location. In addition to the estimating of sex archetypes, territory, and numeric traits for reconstructing biological profile, the pathological diagnosis was conducted in greatest detail. Specifically, we focused on identifying signs of pathologies potential linked to climate and these variations. Medical imaging, including X-ray and CT scan, was employed for in-depth investigation of tibia, skull, particularly focusing on mastoiditis and dental-alveolar pathologies, and trauma. Endoscopic observation using a test-long device were performed to assess the internal nasal and paranasal sinusitis for alteration. Specifically, skeletal remains were examined for the presence or absence of signs attributable to long-bone periostitis, turbinate hypertrophy, deviated nasoseptum, sinusitis, mastoiditis, otitis media, Harris lines, cribra orbitalia, endocranial lesion, porotic hyperostosis, cribra femoralis, cribra humeralis. Dental-alveolar pathologies investigated included intimal hypoplasia, dental calculus, caries, periodontal disease, abscesses, a cemento-animal junction, dental wear, and other morphological variation and pathologies. Regarding the demographic aspect for the 6th and 17th century period, the sample comprised 33 female, 12 males, and 53 individuals of undetermined sex. In the subsequent period,
These proportions are reversed, indicating a higher percentage of male individuals. Concerning age classes, both periods exhibit a significant number of individuals whose age could not be determined. Number 133. The most represented age categories are young adults, 20, 35 years, and middle adult, 35, 50 years. However, analysis of individual style reveal exceptions, such as Via Leoncino in Verona, where non-adults constitute the majority. With respect to pathologies, approximately 25% of the individual exhibit signs attributable to the condition listed. Proportionally, individuals presenting these signs are fewer in the 6th-7th century period compared to subsequent century. For instance, concerning sinusitis, signs of periostitis within the nasal and paranasal sinusitis are observed more frequently in the post-7th century period and are almost absent between the 6th and 7th centuries. However, this finding may be biased due to individuals for whom verification was impossible owing to missing skeletal elements. Similarly, mechanical degenerative pathologies affecting the vertebral column and joint show a higher prevalence in the century following the 8th century. These findings are undoubtedly preliminary and require further investigation. At present, it is not possible to ascertain whether or to what extent the observed pathologies can be directly linked to delalia. It is imperative to integrate and statistically evaluate the archaeological and anthropological data alongside results from genetics, isotopic, and dental calculus analysis. During this period, marked by migration and significant changes, including genetics administered, verifying the presence of potential non-local, alloctonous individual, will be crucial. Furthermore, it is essential to increase the number of individuals under investigation, particularly from the 6th, 7th centuries, and to extend the study to include mountainous sites which have not yet been considered. Finally, conducting comparison with the centuries immediately preceding the 6th century will be vital to verify the actual diachronic variation in pathological condition. Thank you.
Thank you for this interesting talk. The second talk of this section is presented by Professor Per Gelabert, and I see that this is the result of participation of many authors, colleagues of the professor, and the title is Omics Analysis Suggests Diversity Within the Lowest Social Strata Associated Individuals of Late Antiquity in Italy. Thank you.
Let's see if I managed. Okay, yeah, fine. Okay, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation and being here. For me, wait, I will just, before I will put a timer because I really like to know how much time I have to speak. So as I was saying, thank you very much for the invitation. Being here, for me, it's really a pleasure for many different reasons. First, for seeing people that I work with or that I want to, or I look forward to establishing networks, and also because coming to Italy is always fun. I mean, there is no mystery on that. I will present the ongoing results of one project that is funded by the Austrian National Research Fund, which when you see this map, you will you will realize that basically uses the same individuals that many other people has been talking. I mean, when Emanuela Cristiani talked about some individuals, and now Alessandra has also talked about these paleopathological results. Most of these are from the same sites that we have been studying, but from a completely different perspective. I will present the results of this GEMS project, which are the letters for genomics of early medieval societies. And what's this project about? What this project aims to understand, and which are the research questions. So basically, the main idea behind GEMS and our main pursuit is to try to define which is the state of health, or in other words, which is the lifestyle of the people at the lowest strata during a specific time and a specific place. And for different reasons, we chose the North Italy during the early medieval times. And why did we choose that? We chose that mainly for two different reasons. First, because it's an area of Europe that has very good DNA preservation and very good organic preservation, which is key for the analysis that I will present, because what I do is mostly genomics, so we require an area of the world that has very good preservation. We knew that already from northern Italy. And second, because it's also an area and a period that is historically interesting because of the specifications of the area and the specifications of the period. So both things matched, and we started this collaboration and this project two years ago. So as you see, we sampled almost 200 different individuals from these different sites that go as west as Castelseprio and as east as Padua in the northern part of the Italian peninsula. And we focused only on sites that were already archaeologically studied with very well context, and on individuals that already were studied from the morphological and paleopathological side, or that this study was ongoing, as Alessandra has presented. And also we focused on individuals from a strict chronology, from the 6th to the 9th, 10th century. As I said, this part of the world, it's very interesting from the perspective of historical reasons, as many people have already mentioned here. Northern Italy during the late antiquity suffered important political and social changes, mostly defined by the arrival of people from northern latitudes of Europe. That, of course, has an impact in the archaeology and into the living conditions of these people, but that has also an impact on the genetics of these people. Now we know that these migrations during late antiquity basically changed completely the genetic composition of Southern European peoples. So one of the goals of this study was to see till which extent this arrival of people is matched with a change on the social stratification of these people. In other words, are the newcomers mostly representing the lower strata of the society or the richer strata of the society? So basically, taking into consideration all these different factors, these climatic changes from the Lalia, the social stratification changes that are happening due to the incoming of new people, and changes on the different trade routes and on the different sources of economy and the different organization of the society, we wanted to define how all of this is affecting the health of the people in northern Italy. So if you have been following me until here, the first thing that you would probably asking yourself, or a very good question that maybe you're asking yourself, is I have already mentioned that we are focusing on the lowest strata of society, or at least you want to understand who is the lowest strata of society. And the question can be how you know that, how can you focus on the lowest strata, or how you define lowest strata of society when you really don't know who is like high status or low status. Well, here we made an assumption, and this is where our collaboration with the University of Padua and with Alexandra Chavarria has been very useful and productive, because we went through extensive catalogs of sites in northern Italy, and we tried to look for a specific topology of grades. We tried to look for scattered inhumations in unusual places, such as abandoned public buildings, mostly urban contexts where you would not expect that much to have proper inhumations. Also, with inhumations from people that paleopathologically or sociologically looked that had troubles, with indications from isotopic analysis that looked that these people were not eating much meat or much like products associated with a proper diet. So we did this previous very complex analysis, and we selected these about 20 sites, most of them fulfilling these characteristics of uncommon inhumations with people showing already very poor signs of health, which we made the assumption that this would be the lowest strata of society. Then we also included some more proper cemeteries, such as Convento dei Neveri in close to Milan, that we know that it's mostly a rich group of people to compare it with. So which are the main goals of this project? Basically, identify the individuals that belong to this lowest strata of society, and try to define its health characteristics, and try to see if they have worse health in comparison to the richer ones. Also compare all this information with genomics to understand if there is a difference into the ancestry composition of the richest people and the not that much privileged people. And finally, integrate all of these to have a comprehensive understanding of the lifestyle, taking into consideration osteology, health status, diet, and genetic information. So the methodology, it's mostly what I have already said. We selected 200 individuals, and we did all of these analyses. Most of them are still ongoing, especially the pathogen analysis, the genomics, and the residue analysis. But what I will present you is this ongoing integration from the rest of them, and a little bit about these two, because we have some interesting results that I will discuss with you now. So which is the work that we have been doing in Vienna? Because as I have said, and as you have seen, some of the results that I present here, at least that we have used, have not been produced by my team. So the work that we have been doing in Vienna, it's basically the one that relates to paleogenomics. And what is quite unique from this project, and it's still not the standard in the field of paleogenomics, is that from these 200 individuals, from most of them, we have basically used 3 sources of information per individual. We have extracted the DNA from the petrous bone for knowing in detail the genomic ancestry of the individuals. We have sampled a tooth per individual, and went to the pulp to try to extract pathogens from each of the individual, and we have sampled dental calculus for each of the individual. That means that we have information about pathogenic load, about the ancestry, and about the DNA on the dental calculus per each of the individuals. That's a level of information which is very unusual and uncommon still nowadays in the field of paleogenomics, because most of studies, they focus on a single element, but this amount of integration, it's not that common yet. As you know, there has been a boom in ancient DNA field in paleogenomics, so now we have thousands of genomes published in the literature, mostly from Europe, as you can see in this map, and mostly from historical periods. That can be a problem. If you want to start now a project on paleogenomics, you have a little bit constraint that maybe what you identify is not that exciting, because we have now 10,000 genomes published there, so finding new things starts to become challenging. But in this project specifically, that is a big advantage, because look, I will be honest, we are studying 200 individuals from the 6th century in Italy. We don't expect any major result in terms of what they are. But having such a big data set to compare it to enables us to have a very fine scale definition of where these individuals come from. So most likely we can tell which relationships they share at the regional or even sub-regional basis, which is super useful for that. And what did we found? Okay, what we found is, you can see it here, that's a principal component analysis, which is quite of the typical ways that we basically represent individual relationships in paleogenomics. And in this plot, you can see that most of the individuals, each dot is individuals, they are oriented in this right-left axis. So you can see that principal component 1 is the one explaining most of the diversity, which is the x-axis. And just for you to simplify it a lot, on the right, you see the Roman people, so purely Italian ancestry people before the migrations period. And on the left of the plot, what you see, it's purely Germanic people, so purely like Northern Central European people. You can see, I mean, it's difficult to see, but you have to believe me that most of the individuals from this project, so most of the individuals from the GEMS project that were sampled in this context of lowest strata, they are located in the middle of the plot. So that means that already in that period of time, we don't see a clear identification of the lowest strata of society belonging to either the newcomers during the migrations period or being part or being defined ancestry-wise as local people. I mean, with all these problems that semantically this has. So in other words, we are quite convinced that in this period of time, from the 6th to the 9th century, everybody was already very at mix. So the newcomers already at mix widely with the local populations, resulting in a non-differentiated ancestry in terms of like economical capacity, to say it somehow. Nowadays, we also start to have way more powerful tools than just describing the ancestry in these two axes. We have this technique, which is called IVD analysis, which basically enables us to detect exact fragments of DNA that are shared between two individuals. And these individuals can live thousands of years different and also thousands of kilometers away. That's one of the examples that's published in the literature. So basically, they found a connection between one individual that lives 2,000 kilometers from another one and from different periods of time. This is specifically useful because when this is done systematically, we can then create genetic clusters between ancient individuals that enable us to, in other words, group individuals in kins. So we can go beyond the typical kinship analysis of finding like family relationships, who is the father, who is the mother, who is the grandmother. We can also go beyond like differentiating people in very big ancestry groups. We can group people in kin to say, I mean, this is a single clan that moved from this part to that part, and this clan associated with that other clan. So that gives us a level of representation that it would have not been possible like 5 years ago. And what have we identified? One of the main results that we have identified yet is that in most of these cemeteries that I was mentioning, such as Convento dei Neveri, Covo, Arena di Verona, Duomo di Padova, all of the individuals that are buried in these sites, they are highly related, most likely meaning that these cemeteries that we have sampled represent family clans, family groups. We have also identified many relationships between all of these sites with people all across Europe, some from English Saxon, medieval Germany, Eastern Europe, Vikings, indicating that probably the mobility at that time in Europe was that high, that we can identify that these people in Northern Italy already show connections with almost everybody in Central and Northern Europe. So that basically is a hint of the high mobility of people during that period, something that we already knew from written records. Now we are seeing it in genetics, something that we already knew. Very specifically, and this is probably a little bit anecdotic, the individuals buried in Brescia, Alexandra, I don't remember exactly which is the site in Brescia. Capitolio. The individuals buried inside of the Capitolio of Brescia once it was already abandoned. All of them, they share a very strong connection with a single group of individuals from Hungary. So most likely what we have identified here is we have been able to get close to identifying the exact source geographically of where these individuals that ended up buried in the Capitolio of Brescia come from, which would be a region in central Hungary. That's just an example of a work that is still ongoing, but shows the capacity of paleogenomics nowadays to go to very regional resolution in terms of human mobility in antiquity. But that is just a part of the project, because the next question was, okay, how are these people in terms of health? As I have said, we have also sampled their tooth, and we want to know a little bit more about the health. So the main result here is that there is not a big pandemic. We always try to, also when we do paleogenomic analysis in terms of health, we always want to find super important pandemics, that everybody is having Yersinia pestis, everybody has tuberculosis, everybody has lepra, so on and so after. In this data set, after systematically analyzing 200 individuals, there are no pandemics, and we just found some individuals with hepatitis B, which is actually not that problematic because hepatitis B is a chronic disease. You can live with it and it will happen mostly nothing, which is quite interesting because that it's not what we were expecting. We were expecting them to be a little bit worse in terms of health, but that's not the case. Hepatitis B, fortunately, has regional diversity. That's not a figure that we have produced. We are now in the process of matching it with already published sequences. That will most likely give us the idea if these strains of hepatitis B were local or were imported, that it can be very useful for understanding if these viral infections can be related to local infections or are indeed also coming from the newcomers, which is something we are still doing. And finally, we have sequenced the dental calculus of all of these individuals, as I have said, and the DNA preservation is very good. We have been able, that's a plot that basically shows the preservation of the dental calculus genomic-wise. We have been able to recover high-quality DNA for 60 individuals, which is a lot, which is a significant amount of individuals with pretty good dental calculus. And nowadays, one of my students is describing the bacterial composition of dental calculus, associated it with different lifestyles and also health. Unfortunately, we don't have this information yet. I cannot tell you what we have found. Our idea would try to match this with archaeological information, but we cannot do that yet. What I can tell you is some results that we have done with the DNA identified in dental calculus. We have identified wine in some of the individuals through Vitis vinifera DNA. We have identified DNA of pulsatilla, which is a plant that is connected to traditionally medicine usage to treat respiratory diseases that could indicate that some individuals were suffering from respiratory diseases. We have identified mushroom DNA in one of the commented in individuals. We have identified pigeon DNA in almost all of the individuals, probably showing a lot of bird consumption in the individuals during that period of time. And we have also identified in some of them apple and fish DNA. We are continuing with analysis that are not complete, but that basically give us an idea of how this dental calculus analysis can also be used to complement the diet in past populations. So in summary, and just to finish, these individuals at that time and that location already at mixed populations. There are some pathogens, as mostly hepatitis B, but there are no pandemics. The dental calculus preservation is very good, which probably will enable us to do very important and nice analysis. We have found a lot of intra-site connections. As I have said, most of these sites that we have analyzed are family clans, and we have seen that the diet hints. There are hints in the diet that point towards a complex and varied diet, and possibly we have identified the usage of medicine plants in some of the individuals. So thank you very much, and here you see all the people that it's working and has worked in this project, and I thank you FWF, the Austrian Science Fund, for funding all this research.
Thank you very much for this insightful presentation, very rich of result. I think that there are some important topic or question at the end of the session. And now I present the third and final presentation made by Bianca Casa of the University of Pisa. The title is Physiological Stress, Growth Disruptions and Chronic Respiratory Disease During Climatic Downturn, the Late Antiquity Ice Age in Central and Northern Italy. Thank you.
Okay, I hope that's right. Just 1 second for me to arrange my notes. Sorry, everyone. So good afternoon. As you heard, my name is Bianca Casa, and I am the RA basically working on the Biolalia project, which is the bioarchaeology of climate change an investigation of the late antique Little Ice Age. And as Alexandra introduced this morning, this is a joint project between the University of Pisa and the University of Padova, and it's led by two PIs, the first, Professor Valentina Giuffre from the University of Pisa, and the second, Professor Alexandra Chavarria from the University of Padova. And so today I will be presenting the following: physiological stress, growth disruptions, and chronic respiratory disease during climatic downturn, the late antique Little Ice Age in central and northern Italy. And as you will pick up, some of the sites have already been discussed in Alessandra and Pera's discussions today, and but these will be like the formal results of the project. Earlier this year, we went to the PPA in Baltimore, and I also presented the preliminary results. Now I've gone and done a whole ton more data collection. So we have like updated this, and these are the basic final results of the project to this point. So just another background, if you hadn't heard it enough, that the late antique Little Ice Age, what I'll refer to as the Lalia, occurred between the years 536 to 660 of the Common Era. In this era, and this period of cooling was triggered by a series of three major volcanic eruptions that occurred in the Northern Hemisphere. The first volcanic eruption occurred in the year 536 CE, and this was likely in Iceland, and this is the volcanic eruption that initiated the Lalia. And it initiated it by inciting volcanic winter in the Northern Hemisphere, and this included diminished sunlight and climatic downturn in the form of cooling. Then we have the second volcanic eruption, which occurred in El Salvador, and it was either in 539 or 540 CE, and this eruption both exacerbated and prolonged the Lalia. And then finally, the third volcanic eruption occurred in 547 CE, though the origin of this volcano is still not known. And this, again, expanded the period of cooling from the Lalia. And during this period, the average temperature drop was between 2.5 to 2.7 degrees Celsius. So when we're focusing on Italy specifically, we should talk about the compounding effects. So the compounding effects of this period of cooling cause a variety of socio-economic stresses throughout the Northern Hemisphere, and I think both Pera and Alessandra already touched on this. And volcanic winter, ultimately it led to diminished sunlight. This in turn affected agriculture and food production. And the resulting shortened growing season and harsh winters caused widespread food scarcity and malnutrition. And this led to societal strain and economic instability, which caused population movements, warfare, and increased exposure to diseases. In the case of Italy, the Lalia set off a chain reaction of events that led to the reformation of the socio-cultural landscape and impacted several aspects of everyday life. Firstly, there was a major agricultural decline in staple crops such as wheat and barley, and this led to widespread food shortages and famine. So malnutrition became rampant and increased vulnerability to disease. Second was the social and economic strain. The decrease in agricultural output disrupted trade networks and local economies. Wealthier individuals began to hoard food, and this led to greater social inequalities. Thirdly, food scarcity caused population displacement and migration, which was heightened by war and political upheaval. And there's some key events that highlight the effects of the Lalia in Italy during this period, such as the Justinian plague in the year 541 CE. Then we had the Gothic War between 545 to 554 CE, and this led to, of course, destruction, displacement, and hardship. We then have the Lombard invasion of Italy in 568 CE, which introduced new populations and altered the socio-political structure of Italy. And consequently, the compounding effects of climate change, climatic stress, it likely created a challenging environment for fulfilling basic needs. Now, I just want to make a quick note that we are not going to talk about plague victims or victims of the Justinian plague. I had someone misinterpret this before. We're not interpreting what we suspect to be people that died of the plague. That's not the purpose of this project. So I just want to make that clear for anyone that doesn't work with bioarchaeological data. We're not saying these individuals died of the Justinian plague. So the aim and approach of this study was to evaluate if the climatic downturn of the Lalia caused episodes of physiological stress and impacted the relative health of individuals from 6th to 8th century central and northern Italy. And we used a three-pronged bioarchaeological approach to address this research question. The first was to assess the frequency of chronic respiratory disease through osseous changes to the maxillary sinuses and auditory ossicles. The second approach was to evaluate instances of short stature and stunting, indicating disruptions to growth. And thirdly, we assessed the prevalence of physiological stress markers in both skeletal and dental remains, which supposedly indicate episodes of chronic stress, particularly during childhood. Although we have to acknowledge that there is some contention in the bioarchaeological and paleopathological literature regarding the true etiology of so-called stress markers, but when we're working with only macroscopic analyses, we are limited to where the literature is currently at. But we do acknowledge that there is some contention regarding the true etiology of such markers. So for the materials, this is a large result of the collaboration between University of Pisa and Padova that we have been able to incorporate 6 sites from 6 skeletal assemblages from 6 different sites. There is a little bit of a bias towards northern Italy, as we have 5 sites from northern Italy, including Como, Variano, Verona, Pomigliano, and Archeologici. And in total, we had 85 individuals. And from San Genesio in central Italy in Tuscany, we had 59 individuals. So overall, we have a total of 144 individuals, including 101 adults, 43 non-adults, and approximately 51 males and 35 females. And as you can see, some of the chronology of the sites is a little bit, it's not exactly on the 6th century. Some overlap, but we did our best to include individuals that were dated to the 6th century through absolute dating methods, but some of them would expand into either the preceding or succeeding periods. So concerning the methods, we used a combination of chronic respiratory disease, stature, and physiological stress markers. Chronic respiratory disease was assessed through chronic maxillary sinusitis and otitis media using established methods. Short stature was analyzed for adults by comparing Z-scores with the median stature for males and females, and individuals whose stature was below the median were classified as having short stature. Non-adult stature was calculated according to the method of Rough 2007, and similar to adults, stunted growth was assessed in non-adults by comparing the Z-scores to both the World Health Organization and the European Height for Age charts. And the physiological stress markers that we recorded included cribra orbitalia and cribra crani, subperiosteal new bone formation on the long bones, and linear enamel hyperplasia of the anterior dentition, and this all followed published and established guidelines. So now for the results, if we start to consider the general demography first, as you can see in this slide, the majority of individuals did in fact live into adulthood. However, we should also consider that differential mortuary treatment of non-adults could lead to their underrepresentation in this study. Of the total sample, the highest proportion of individuals lived into older adulthood, being classified as over 50 years in skeletal remains. And for non-adults, the most common age at death was in early childhood between 2 to 5 years. I would do one for sex as well, but it wasn't appropriate for this talk today. Now, if we consider chronic respiratory disease, due to the poor preservation of the maxillary sinuses and their fragile nature, it was most appropriate to evaluate the results overall rather than by site. So you can see like where I have the red box, because if we were comparing it between the sites, it's going to be very biased due to the preservation. And even despite this, almost half of the individuals that could be observed exhibited evidence of chronic respiratory disease through osseous changes in the maxillary sinuses. However, this wasn't statistically significant, and very few individuals had preserved auditory ossicles to assess otitis media. So roughly 10% of individuals had otitis media, being chronic inner ear infection. However, these results are not so significant because the sample size is too small. And when looking at short stature in relation to growth disruptions, due to small sample size again, we use modified Z-score calculation as per the Peso, Lanfranco and colleagues 2020. where stature calculations were below the median, and approximately half of males and half of females exhibited short stature. And this is quite an important result of this study, actually, because stature is one of the most susceptible features to stress during childhood. So when we consider stunting in children, it could be assessed in 12 non-adults. And what's really notable, as you can see, that there was 2 that had severe cases of stunting. Now, generally, stunting is considered severe if it's negative 3 standard deviations of the mean. In this case, we had one individual from San Genesio with -7 standard deviations, and then we had one from Piccola that was -8 standard deviations from the mean. So these non-adults were both infants, and at least from San Genesio, when we were able to observe the rest of the skeleton, it was diagnostic of infantile scurvy. However, the individual from Piccola was too poorly preserved to do further analyses without any cranial bones remaining. However, it would be likely that this individual also had some form of metabolic disorder or was facing some form of nutritional stress, because to have a -8, it's quite an extreme case of stunting. And then when we consider the physiological stress markers, stress markers occurred in approximately 20 to 40% of individuals, and the most frequently observed marker was linear enamel hyperplasia, followed by crypt orbitalia. And there was a statistically significant difference in the crypt prevalence of crypt orbitalia and subperiosteal new bone formation between sites, though this is likely swayed by small sample size again. So it's better to consider the overall results, as you can see, in the corner in the red box again. So when we're considering this by sex and age at death, stress markers occurred roughly equally between males and females, and there was no statistically significant difference between the sexes. But in general, adults had a higher prevalence of stress markers than non-adults, but this is not surprising when we consider the osteological paradox and also the plasticity of children's skeletons when absorbing stresses. And there was a statistically significant difference between adults and non-adults in regards to subperiosteal new bone formation. But again, this is also not surprising considering that periostiosis is debated and it must be chronic to leave evidence on the skeleton. So children might just not have been living long enough also for this to affect them. And then when we consider the co-occurrence of such stress markers with short stature and or stunted growth, this could be evaluated in 51 individuals. And we're considering 2 or more markers being observable. 34% of individuals exhibited a co-occurrence, and there was a higher frequency in males than females, and of course in adults and non-adults. But when this criterion was restricted to 2 or more markers, only 13% of individuals had this co-occurrence. And then it became more frequent in females than males. But when we compare the results of this study to all the other published studies from the Common Era in Italy, we can see here all the sites in the red box here. There is not a substantial difference, and it can be deceiving to the eye. It looks like there is an increase in the occurrence of physiological stress markers during the Lalia. However, really, we just have a lack of data from the preceding and succeeding periods afterwards, which are heavily biasing this. And also the individual crude prevalence are, again, heavily biased by sample size. So from my opinion, this is not a substantial difference actually between the periods. It just reflects a lack of data. So what does this all mean? It's all good to present data, but it's how we interpret it that matters. Well, nearly half of all the individuals exhibited some evidence of physiological stress and or chronic respiratory disease. And when comparing between sites, Popogliano had a substantially less evidence of periodic or chronic stress than other sites, and this likely owes to the small sample size of 14 individuals. Short stature was common in the study base, however, it is actually likely underrepresented. As I discussed at the start of the presentation, the 6th century was a period of disruption, which includes the Lombard invasion of Italy and the Gothic Wars. And archaeological evidence from some of the sites, and in particular San Genesio, indicates individuals of Germanic origin, likely Goths, if it were known to have a substantially higher average stature than those local to other parts of central Italy, and this also could have biased some of the stature results. So 2 infants, of course, had extreme cases of stunting, one which was attributable to infantile scurvy, though the other couldn't be assessed. And this would also suggest that the diet was monotonous during the period and lacked essential vitamins, though, of course, we need to do further chemical analyses such as isotopes to further investigate this. And there was no apparent sex-based patterns in the occurrence of stress markers, but there was a statistically significant difference between adults and non-adults. And in addition, a large portion of the sample, almost 50%, exhibited evidence of chronic respiratory disease. The cooler climate means that people would have spent longer periods inside and exposed to smoke from hearths and while trying to keep warm, and likely this could have contributed to that burden. And this may have also have been heavily influenced by the lalia as food shortages and migrations increased susceptibility to disease such as viral infections. In addition, volcanic winter may have exposed individuals to greater levels of air pollution that may have also influenced the occurrence of respiratory disease, which is known to occur by exposure to particulate matter smaller than 2.5 micrometers. Sorry, I'm keep going. When we compare it with published isotopic data, there is only 2 studies that we compare to, one from my colleague Dr. Giulia Riccomi, who's here today, and the other from Dr. Maurizio Marinata from the University of Padova, who's online today. And their results are as follows. So for carbon and nitrogen isotopes from San Genesio, they indicate increasing access to C4 foodstuffs, and particularly a growing reliance on millet and animals that were also eating this type of crop. And the isotope ratios were typical for herbivores and omnivores in C3 environments, though there was some exceptions, such as roosters, ox, and wild pigeons. And sorry, Julia, you can correct me if I'm incorrect. And these also contribute to the C4 ratios. And in comparison, at COVO, the carbon and nitrogen isotopes indicated diet that mainly consisted of C4 plants such as millet and sorghum, although there was some outliers. I think Dr. Cristiani also mentioned, Professor Cristiani also mentioned this morning, there was 4 individuals from COVO that had pure C3 diet. And the interesting thing was, though, that there was the oxygen isotopes that Maurizio conducted also suggested a single water source. So it's not clear if these individuals were at the same site and eating a completely different diet, or they came in at some other point. But we will assess this in the future. But as we know, millet has a higher protein content than other grasses, particularly compared to wheat and rice. And it also has a higher density of B vitamins and also calcium, iron, and zinc. But of note is that there is actually no vitamin C in these types of crops, and this could also account for why we're having cases of scurvy during these periods. So overall, what does this tell us about the adaptation strategies of the climatic downturn of the lalia in central and northern Italy? Well, there was a gradual shift to resilient crops, and it's unlikely that people realize fast what's happening around them. So over time, they would have seen that their crops aren't growing, so they've changed course. And this means that they've modified their existing dietary strategies and utilized crops such as millet that are drought and cold resistant. Well, not completely resistant, but are more strong in these environments. And they also diversified their food sources. And this was evidenced by the presence of wild pigeon, ox, and rooster at San Genesio. And this would have also led to an increased reliance on long-term food storage and preservation, which in turn could have led to other health issues, particularly if the grain started becoming spoiled with mold or fungi, etc. And these changes in subsistence practices likely would have also impacted the division of labor within societies. People who used to be farming grapes, for example, maybe had to start farming millet instead. And but overall, the results indicate that the highest proportion of individuals from the study, they lived into older adulthood, and they were resilient regardless of the climatic fluctuations that they were experiencing during their life. So just I'll just go through this very quickly. So of course there's limitations to the study, including both small sample size, preservation, and the etological debates regarding physiological stress markers. And we also have a lot of future prospects. And a lot of the people in this room are going to be involved in the specialist analyses, including dental calculus and isotope analyses. But also, of course, in the future, maybe more ADNA studies like Pera's doing to assess the genetic admixture, especially when we're doing studies that are evaluating stature. And of course, we need to expand these type of systematic studies into the preceding and succeeding periods of the Lalia before and after the 6th century, so we can really get a better idea. But the data needs to be collected in more uniform manners so that it can be actually compared. This is a huge problem when people aren't publishing data in its entirety so that it can actually be compared by other researchers. That was like one of the largest problems with this project. A lot of the work that's already been done is not fully published. But these are my references, and I just again want to acknowledge the funding of the Biolalia project, as well as University of Pisa, University of Padova, and the Ministry of Research and Culture in Italy. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca, for this presentation. Now we are at the end of the second session, and then we can open to the question. If there are some questions. Yes.
Oh, do the other speakers want to come up here?
I have a question for you, Blanca.
Perfect.
First of all, thank you for your beautiful paper. You really worked very well, and I'm very proud to be part of your research, really. It's more a reflection. Maybe I should do them at the end, but I'm always afraid that at the end people is taking their trains and they are leaving. So better now. And maybe at the end we have new questions. When you talk about for example, in the context, you and all the others, it's just the occasion now for saying it. When you talk about the context and political crisis and so on, agricultural decrease, we should be a bit careful, and I talk as, I think, the only archaeologist and historical person who can contextualize the elements here. We just have to remember that the Lalia period and the crisis at the end of the Roman world is one more crisis in a process of crisis which started in the 2nd century and finished by the 8th. That means when we talk about agricultural decrease with respect to what? Because from the 2nd century on, the crisis, Antoninian crisis, in the 3rd century, the Cyprian crisis and the Cyprian peace and so on, already had huge consequences in the Roman Empire and mostly in Italy. We know the population of Rome, for example, this is well known, was until the 2nd century at about 700,000, 800,000, I don't think a million, but by the end of the 3rd centuries and the beginning of the 8th, the number had highly decreased. So how much agricultural crisis because of Lalia and the end of the Roman Empire, or many of these things had already started? There is an historical problem, which is the agri-deserti. From the 2nd century, emperors were trying to avoid lands which had been abandoned from the 2nd century. And it appears again in the 3rd, in the 4th, in the 5th. So I'm not sure how many things we have to attribute and to put on the Lalia and end of the Roman Empire crisis, and how many were already not only started, but highly consolidated. Sometimes another thing I question myself is when we think about Justinian reconquest and so on. It was a very good period. We had the peace, okay, but it was the moment where the Eastern Roman Empire decides they are so strong again to retake the West. So Well, we'll see. If we compare it with the construction of churches, for example, with travel intensity and so on, it was not a bad period. On the contrary, many churches, I think most Spanish churches, for example, were constructed in the 6th century. Many of them. It's true that Italy has the Greek Gothic war, and it is very high, especially in Toscana, I think, in Tuscany. I'm not sure how much in northern Italy, Verona and Padova and so on. So, great, but let's contextualize this period in relationship with earlier also one. Then another thing, as archaeologists, that's my role here, so it's on the different sites. And that is a problem that I have always had, and that's why we started our project on the lower status people. The sites that we have studied are from very different contexts. San Genesio is a church. It means height, people buried there, height status, the same as Pava and other sites in your area. The site of Flero, Clocovo, Duomo, and so on are very low status site. So when we think about, for example, C4, C3. C4 in Covo, in my opinion, is just due that they were the lowest people on the social strata, because Covo is probably a Lombard site, but of the less privileged population. They had very low status graves, they don't have grave goods, and if you see the anthropology there is also quite, let's say, not good health, okay? Duomo. Duomo, you will think about Duomo, cathedral, high quality, but stop. When the graves were put in the Duomo was abandoned because it had been destroyed by Lombards. That means we have to take care of each single cemetery, analyze each single cemetery, and see what happens there, because many of the things, I think, it's not due to Lalia or whatever, like millet or not millet, but to the status and economic, let's say economic level of the population there. So I think for this reason, it's very good that we could work together in La Biolalia project and on GEMS project, because they are two different subjects, two different focus on similar period, okay? I don't know if you understand what I mean. And I think in both contexts, it's great that we have so many analyses and so many possibilities and so many methodologies, but never forget to put them in context, because I think the most relevant thing in both projects is, not because it's my part, but also because it's the context and the archaeological interpretation of the sites. And that will allow us in some way to give new answers which are not, let's say, expected as before. Sorry.
Sure. Okay, I can respond to a couple of things. The first part of your question regarding from the 2nd century AD, all of the changes that we're going through, this sounds like your next project that you need to do between the 2nd and the 6th centuries to fill in this gap. But that's kind of what I was also trying to say. Like, we don't have enough data from the preceding and the succeeding periods to really fully contextualize, even from a bioarchaeological perspective, having comparative data. This is a huge problem. And only in time will that be rectified. But I agree. It's like, how do we balance like all of the events that were going on at once? And I have read through some of the historical documents. Like the history professors are writing also on the Lalia, and I understand there's a lot of debate between the history professors and the archaeologists also of the 6th century and this type of time period. And there's like a lot of people that will say that the Lalia caused all of these things. We can't say that. All we can say, especially from a bioarchaeology perspective, is we know all these things were occurring in this region of the world at this time, but we cannot say that they're related. And this is kind of why I was mentioning that the previous time I gave a talk on this, someone misinterpreted me to say that I was talking about the victims of the Justinian plague. That's absolutely not what we're doing. That's not what we're saying, and that's not the project. But it's about understanding how we can use our data I agree with you, it needs to be fully contextualized to play the part. The second part you were talking about, I also had a good response to. What was it? No, I agree with you. No, I agree with you completely. And this is one of the problems in all archaeology. We all need to be working together to contextualize. And especially, this is what I want to say. Okay, your second part, you were talking a lot about status. And I can speak for myself as a bioarchaeologist. Maybe some of the others in the room will agree or disagree. We have to be so cautious with inferring status, especially in bioarchaeology, because this can then lead into gender or ethnic semantics, and it can seem like you're inferring some person of a certain sex or ethnicity is of a lower status and this kind of thing. And we have to be so cautious with this because we're trying. There's a big push in bioarchaeology for decolonizing bioarchaeology and paleopathology and physical anthropology. And so there's a lot of work to basically, I would say, although we have to consider the archaeological context for sure when it comes to status, a lot of the time we're trying to keep things more clinical to avoid any misinterpretation, any over-interpretation one way or the other. This is my personal opinion. This is why I'm very cautious. But of course, I work mainly in prehistoric context. This is like probably one of my first historical context sort of projects. And there is a lot of archaeological data. But again, it's about, I've also worked with so many sites where the archaeologist has interpreted sex of the skeleton again by the grave goods. And this is also a problem. And so we're trying to avoid it by just focusing on the paleopathological perspective, where what we can say, what we can't. When it comes to also diet, I guess this is where we need more archaeobotanical evidence as well to complement the isotope work as well. So the only reason we kind of focus a little bit more in on those type of this type of interpretation of millet or C4 plants, it's actually less about about the status. It comes more towards the nutrient and the nutritional value of because I expected when we started this project we would actually see quite a decline, quite an increase in physiological stress markers per se, or very high proportions, or even on metabolic stress. But we weren't seeing that. So when we're talking about it and we're looking at all the data that we have, and the isotopes are saying, okay, there's a greater incorporation of C4 plants, but what is it? And I think I had a conversation with my colleague Julia about this. The highest nutrient content is protein. So we're thinking the reason we're not actually seeing so much physiological stress per se in the skeleton is they are having a lot of protein, but perhaps it's more a monotonous diet and it's not getting all of the nutrient profiles. But again, with more specialist analyses and so on, we can explore this more in the future. But Exactly. yeah. And that's all ongoing. As you see, we have fortunately all of the isotopes going on. Dental calculus with Professor Cristiani. Per is doing a lot of the DNA. So we have a lot of areas moving as well for the project, and hopefully we can bring it all together at some point as well. I know there was other speakers though. If there's questions, we can either have more questions now or at the end if they prefer, at the end of the day. If anyone has questions for Per or Alessandra.
There are some other questions. Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question. In the sample studied, there are important metabolic disease in women and children?
Only in children so far, from what we've seen. Only in a couple of children, which is why we were looking quite a lot at what was already done with the isotopes, and we're doing more isotopic analyses in the guise of the project. So once we have those results, we'll know a little bit more why actually we're not seeing more metabolic disorder. We were expected to see more, but at least we know we have one case of infantile scurvy. potentially another, but there was not enough preserved of the individual for me to assess and say whether it had scurvy or not. So that's an assumption, not science. Yeah.
Can I just, I actually have a question, a curiosity for Perrin. I was interested in the pulsatilla and the other medicinal plants that you detected in the dental calculus, and I was wondering, is something like with dental calculus, because I've been, working, not myself, like collaborating with dental calculus and metagenomics, and it was not easy to kind of detect specific DNA plants, or in a way you have to kind of interact with the data in order to ask, is there this or this or that? So what I wanted to know, is it like for dental calculus that you see something and then you kind of interpret based on the comparative analysis, or how much about the medicine, the medicinal, or the ecology and the user specific plant in a period, like kind of acts into your interpretation or in the way you can see things in the data you get?
Thank you very much for the question, and I think that you are about to I don't know how to say it, but unravel the code of all these analysis, especially with plants. Everything it's a little bit suggestive, and this is mainly because two different things. So when we do metagenomics, for example, if we would just aiming to do it for animals, we will not be having these problems, because identifying animals is very easy, but plants are not. And that's mainly for two different reasons. First, because the data set is still biased, and the reference panels that we have are not close to complete widespread or whatever. We have only little amount of diversity in our panels, so what we compare it to, it's not the whole biodiversity, but just subset. And apart from that, plants have a problem in comparison with animals. It's not a problem, but plants are less diverse genetically within them in comparison to, for example, how animals are genetically diverse. So in reality, yes, we have to do what you have been already saying. We can point towards a family of plants, sometimes a genus of plants, and then we start basically leveraging our information, the usage of this genera, or the distribution of different species within that taxonomical level, and then you make this kind of assumptions. So there are plants that are quite easy to identify, mainly the ones that are used and they are very well described. Other ones, as is the case of this one, the identification is done a little bit using it, but I am quite confident because I don't think that it can be anything else. But yes, that requires a lot of self-interpretation.
You're working on as certain pathologies, you can kind of limit, or saying, as like a sinusitis, for example, and then, looking for certain, which in a way is biased at the beginning, because in a way you're searching something specifically.
I was saying, and it happens all the time, when you do this kind of identifications, you always end up with heaps of things that you know that they cannot be, because you identify things that makes no sense. Those ones you have to exclude, and you have just to assume that you are identifying those plants or other taxa just because of the reference bias. But you have no way to tell where that's coming from, because when you identify, for example, I don't know, like a plant that it's only present in Eastern Island, to say something. You know that it could be possible, but most likely that's something similar to another genera of plants, but you will never know which one it is, so just exclude it. But yeah, it's very biased.
Say that. But I did.
Absolutely. This is why, and this is the same thing I basically transmit to my students and to everybody. Doing paleogenomics in the 2025 without having a continuous discussion with archaeologists or botanists or historians, it's completely nonsense.
Yeah, fine.
Still people that still doing that.
At the same time, it's important that archaeologists know when they can do the work and when they have to rely on a specialist.
I have a question also for you. Thank you very much for your presentation and your Bianca as well and yours as well. But I have a question. You mentioned that in your presentation there is a case in which you discovered the DNA of some herb that could have potentially medical I don't know use. And my question is it just one individual?
Yeah. I think it is manually. Yeah, it's. I am absolutely sure in one. It could be in others. That's also a little bit linked to what Emanuela was mentioning before. Here, it's difficult to say yes or no. I mean, you can be very sure in some. You can be dubious in others. It's the same with pathogens. You can be very sure that someone has a Yersinia pestis. You could be dubious with other ones. I am very sure with one. It could be with others.
Yeah, but my question also is contextualization regarding contextualization of all our data, and the question arises, for instance, if you have trepanation as a procedure in, for instance, early medieval time, doesn't matter, prehistory, Bronze Age, it should be painful procedure from my point of view, and the question arises, can we try to chase something that could be use as analgesic or something like that? And I answer? Oh, I answered because I was looking at Peter because I was asking actually this because this is in a way what we are having a similar project funded by the ministry. It is PRIN and is about the medicine in some medicament and just finding this type of evidence in dental calculus. So just find mushrooms or even like poppy seeds or like, yeah, absolutely. So we are trying to kind of systematically analyze chemistry, dental calculus from modern individual that have like certain substance with forensic archaeologists because forensic anthropology has shown that dental calculus actually can prove the presence or the absence, that they were taking, for example, cocaine or other substances of abuse more than blood. So it stays more than blood in modern time. So what we're trying to do is just to kind of systematically find a comparison and modern comparison to apply to individuals that for sure had either pathologies or that for sure needed some treatment, like trepanation, for example, because survived. So in a way, we know, like we kind of reduce the possibility that they didn't take anything. But if they survived, for sure they did something. And it could be possible, but it's chemical analysis because this kind of assumption leave like less micro residues that you can see optically. But with chemistry, with specific gas chromatography, the ones that are used for forensic and toxicological analysis, maybe you can do that. We were trying. We found on some Bronze Age trepanation guy, yeah. So it works. It works. That there is that kind of opportunity because I had a project, I don't know, a few years ago, bioarchaeology of care. There is a basically theoretical model in which if you put your data into that model, you can calculate if care was needed, the amount of care and so on. And maybe that persons can be basically target for the analysis because they lived in pain, I don't know, and so on. And my assumption was mushrooms, but maybe some herbs also can be option.
Yeah, or like more logical things that Emanuela was saying. I mean, poppy seeds, you find it everywhere. My grandmother always told me that when she was like a kid, they would like take poppy seeds infusions. That was widespread. I mean, Paparum somniferum, you identify it everywhere. It's everywhere. And also alcohol. I mean, consume of alcohol.
Yeah, there are some graphic data from the Montenegro in its 18th century about, for instance, for trepanation, the woman should take half a liter of rakia, which is brandy, and grappa, and male should take a whole liter of alcohol of rakia in order to be to survive trepanation. So, but it's ethnography. It's not like we have chemical proof for that.
Makes sense.
But again,
But archaeologists, yeah.
Okay, there are some other questions about it's very interesting, this discussion about
Particularly about the
it's very interesting. It's a big problem, but for example, in the study of mummies, it's more simple because we can analyze hair, no, and the components of for every metal, for example. No? We found medicine and syphilis therapies, for example. It's typical, but of course, in skeletal remains, it's a little bit different. And okay, if there are no other questions, we can end this section, and I think that now is lunch time.